Hello guys, welcome to Proxima What Ifs. So in this video, we will see, what if RIMURU Tempest was reincarnated in solo leveling? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. Blue Cathedral, Quiet Teeth. The statues had a rhythm to their killing. You could hear it if you stopped listening for footsteps or panicked breathing and let the silence press against your ears. A vacuumed hush, then a breath of stone, then a soft board scrape, like chalk. The C-rank raid team ahead of me had already missed it. Fear drowns percussion. Don't move, I said, and the two rookies froze like I'd pressed pause on them. A spear of light carved through the spot where the taller one's shoulder had been a heartbeat earlier and detonated against the far wall. Bits of ancient mortar pattered across my hair. The rookies blinked in grateful shock. Their helmets clinked when they nodded too hard. One wore a guild patch I didn't recognize, some flashy Phoenix brand, the other's badge was still in its plastic sleeve. Did I say breathe? I added. They exhaled together, getting the joke late. Good. Jokes keep people in their bodies. This cathedral dungeon wasn't one I knew. Blue tiles, blue windows, even the shadows were blue. The color of deep water, and cold as the tiles. The statues were not angels. They were accountants with wings, faces sanded smooth, eyes scooped clean, scales in one hand and knives in the other. I had seen the world make prettier monsters. I believe it when it tells me it doesn't care. My name, printed on the association's laminated ID clipped to my jacket, said Lim Hanru. It's a neat lie. Neat lies are the ones you can use to help people. On 3, we're going to step sideways between those two benches, I said. Left, then right, then left. Don't lift your feet, slide. Keep your chest facing me. No sudden angles. Phoenix Patch swallowed and did as told. Plastic sleeve copied. The statues pivoted a fraction. They were watching the space you intended to occupy, not the space you were in. You can fight a plan that's already made. Easier than fighting a person. Now, I whispered. We slid. The rookies knocked their knees against the pew legs, but I'd picked a route forgiving to clumsy. Beams lanced the air where shoulders would have rolled if we had turned. Plastic sleeve yelped when a beam grazed the air near her ear. I slid a hand up and flicked her helmet 2 centimeters to correct the angle. The second volley passed by like a train narrowly missing a coin on the tracks. Ahead, the corridor opened on a nave hung with blue glass banners, a weird daisy GN choice for a place that made you bleed. The banner glass didn't tinkle. The air ate sound. Hush hush cathedral. Quiet teeth. The rookies didn't dare to speak, so I did. Tell me your names, I said. It matters to say it. Saying names puts noise back in a place that wants you small. Choi Min Jae, Phoenix Patch whispered, like the statues would put him on a list. Porter, temporary. Park Da Bin, plastic sleeve whispered. New recruit. Support caster. We're not dead, I said. That's a promising start. For a moment, against the cold color, the boy snorted. Yeah, then quieter. Sir, I'm allergic to sir, I said. And let the smile reach my eyes. Hanru is fine. It felt good to wear that smile. It had the shape of the one I used to wear when people were frightened and I knew I could help. I say, used to, because memory comes back like beach glass, polished. The edges still cut if you look too long. 5 paces ahead, a statue's knife hand trembled. Its rhythm was off. It was fighting to change its mind about us. There's the tell, I thought. They don't like reevaluation midstream. If I gave them something moving and irregular, they'd step on their own toes. I'll go first, I said. If I tell you to duck, duck. If I tell you to pretend to be a pancake, you pancake. I'll demonstrate. What's a? I flattened. Muscle and bone turned obedient, malleable. My shoulder caved gracefully around the corner of a pew. My arm lengthened and thinned to slide past a stone knee. Not dramatic. Not the kind of shapeshift that makes people scream. Just the exact amount of flexibility to disrespect geometry. The rookies' eyes widened behind their visors. I felt pressure at the back of my skull, like someone lightly pinched an antenna. Gluttonous archive, mimic variants applied. Quarantine maintains. Good to hear from you, I murmured. The voice, mine, not mine, didn't flood me with explanations or graphs. It never did more than it had to since I woke up in this world. I appreciated that. People who talk too much in a crisis aren't helpful. People who talk just enough sometimes save lives. Past the 3 statues in the left alcove and the 2 in the right, the floor tile. S were slightly misaligned in a repeating pattern. 3 tight seams, then a long gap. I spread my fingers and tapped the long gaps with my knuckles in a rhythm, a telephone dial tone if nobody had ever invented telephones. The statues' heads ticked along to it. Left, right, left. I stepped when they looked away from where I intended to step. The rookies did as told. I heard their boots rasp softly across stone. Phoenix Patch managed not to scream when his jacket snagged the horn of a statue's wing and nearly tugged him forward into the killing lane. Dabin touched my sleeve, not to cling, but to confirm presence. I let her. We reached a deeper chamber where the blue glass banners converged into a cross-hatched ceiling. The cold there was active, the kind that snuffs candles before you strike a match. At the far end was a door without hinges and no seam around its border, just a rectangle of deeper blue. My breath fogged. The rookies' breaths came in little machine hitches. Their helmets regulated air in poor imitation of calm. There were 6 of us, Min Jae said through the helmet comms, because saying it finally was better than holding it. We lost 3. His voice chopped. He did. And he have the practice yet to smooth grief in motion. He'd get it if he didn't die today. I prefer people not get that practice at all. Where's the medic? I asked. Still inside, Da Bin said. Her transponder pinged off the far side of the chapel. Then it went quiet. Association said to hold position. We didn't want to leave her. I nodded once. Another pinch at the base of my skull. Gluttonous archive, threat map updated. Anomaly. Corridor ahead exhibits non-occupation. Gluttonous archive, note. Vessel, shadow, flagged elsewhere. Purge conditions, pending. Elsewhere, I repeated. The word tasted like trouble I didn't get to choose yet. We're not going elsewhere. We're going forward. Hanru, Da Bin ventured, voice small but intact. Are you high rank or just brave? Just hungry, I said. Because it's true in more ways than she could know. The door without seams disapproved of me. It thrummed at my approach. I rested my palm against it, imagining I was pushing on lake ice. And let the shape of my hand alter to match the vibration's length. The door didn't know what to do when a thing wanted in on its terms. Where a stamp would have cracked it, a caress confused it. It softened, the way stubborn things soften when they feel seen. Behind it was the hollow. It wasn't a hole. Holes are simple. This was an absence that had assembled itself into an object to make their emptiness simpler for you. It was the size of a baby's skull, roughly spherical, and the air around it acted like a sulk. The blue cathedral's light refused to sit near it. When I took a step closer, something like winter backed up a step. Don't touch, Min Jae said immediately, because the world had trained him to say that and be right. Good instinct, I agreed. I reached into my satchel anyway, took out a length of fabric that belonged to nobody particularly important, and wrapped the absence in it. It fought being looked at more than it fought being held. It fit in my hand like a heartbeat. That had decided not to beat right now. Cold climbed my wrist. My fingers numbed and then came back tingling. Gluttonous archive, object, untyped null kernel. Gluttonous archive, advisory, qua. Ranting recommends containment by destruction. Gluttonous archive, counter advisory. Data suggests later leverage. Gluttonous archive, I am listening. Good, I said. Keep doing that. Da Bin shifted, anxious. What is it? Evidence, I said. And bait. We didn't get to debate the second part because the statues in the next aisle overwoke up politely. No grinding. No dramatic head swivel. Their knives simply became a fact about the air between us. 8 of them. Most dungeons teach you they get angrier when you break their rules. These didn't have anger. They had a job. Min Jae, I said. Back wall. When I move, you move. Keep your hands on my jacket. Copy. Da Bin. Yes. When I say go, slide right, cast your strongest ward left. Do not step into your own ward. She hesitated for a fraction. That doesn't draw a circle. That's why it'll work, I said. The statues liked circles. Circles are what you make when you want to keep the world out and the world knows it. You have to get the circle to believe you before it believes the thing that made it. I stepped, not away but toward the knives, breaking the rhythm on purpose. The first 2 beams were lazy, anticipating a flinch. I didn't flinch. I blurred a wrist into something slim and sharp and flicked. The beam kissed the edge of a broken pew shield I'd snuck into my hand the moment we entered the aisle, and the angle turned. Light met light as it glanced off the statue's companion's blade. False kinship, the beams argued. That gave me the half-second I wanted. Go. Da Bin slid right, panic in every muscle except the ones she had convinced to obey orders. She cast left on an angle like a thrown plate that had changed its mind about where the table was. Her barrier bloomed as a half-ellipse that pretended to be a whole circle long enough for an accountant with wings to accept it. The statue stabbed into the barrier's lie and got stuck believing. Min Jae's fingers were iron on my jacket. I let him have that grip. He fed me the memory of a voice calling for help 3 chambers back, thin and calm through a medic's training. The memory was not in words. He had heard it and kept it because he wanted someone to come get her who could. I moved like water through chairs. That sounds poetic. It was practical. Water wins arguments with corners. One statue got mouthy and went off cadence. Its blade kissed my forearm. It should have cut through flesh and tendon and the meat beneath. The meat there decided to be something else for a second. The blade skated and I felt pain with the clean honesty I always try to keep room for. Pain is data, not judgment. We reached the transept where collapsed scaffolding had made a mean little maze. The medic, Seo Mina, if I went by the name embroidered on the trom. A bag, was down on one knee behind a broken column drum, one hand on a young porter's throat, gauging pulse. Her other hand held a piece of glass to keep it from falling on his face. She looked up when she heard us, took me in, helmet. Posture, the way I wasn't sweating, and decided things about me the way good medics do, efficiently, in lists. You took your time, she said, voice steady, as if we had all scheduled this. Tell me you brought something to splint with. Better, I said, lifting the satchel. Hands are good, she admitted, and gave me a slit smile before turning to practicalities. He's got a compound fracture and shock. If I move the wrong way, the glass will cut his carotid. I need 3 seconds of nobody breathing down my neck. Min Jae and Da Bin took a breath and put it away for later. 3 seconds, I said. You'll get 5. She looked at me sharply. I let her see the confidence that wasn't a bluff. On my count, she said. 3, 2, 1. I moved with her. The shard lifted. I palmed it with fingers that flattened thin and steady. The boy's throat looked soft enough to bruise at a glance. Nina slid her hand under his jaw, keeping pressure precise. Shish. He gave me the kind of nod that is a signed contract. Splint. I set the satchel down and let my hands remember the shapes they needed from other lives. A splint is only wood until it has a story about holding together. I whispered that story to it with a trick I shouldn't have remembered and watched the fibers accept the job. The synthesis was minimal, a leather strap, a shard of mana stone dust. The fine net of Da Bin's ward magic tidied into something less showy. The world flickered in my periphery, like heat haze off tarmac, and I felt the small, clean cost of putting 2 unlike things into one honest thing. Gluttonous archive, synthesis executed. Cost, minor mana plus focus. Gluttonous archive, recommend glucose replenishment within 30 minutes. Bossy, I muttered. What? Nina asked. Nothing, I said, and tightened the strap. The boy didn't wake all the way. He did that thing people do when they're trying not to cry in case it hurts someone else. I touched his shoulder. It helped. Behind us, a statue reconsidered the pretense of being a statue. The air dipped. I lifted my head. Da Bin, I said, I need that ward to be impolite. Can you do impolite? She squared her jaw. Sir, I mean Han Ru, I can try. We like try, I said. She flung the word not as a wall but as a suggestion. It quivered like a bubble that wasn't sure about being round. The statue, raised on a diet of rules, accepted the premise incorrectly and sliced into it with satisfaction. That was the moment its rhythm stepped off the beat I'd been counting, and I went in sideways and set my palm against its ankle. It was stone until it realized something softer than water was touching it with attention. The ankle softened because that's how stubborn things soften when they feel seen. I did not break it. I changed it just enough that when it put weight down, it wobbled. The knife it was planning to sink into Mina's spine sank into the flagstone instead. The shock traveled through its frame and it hissed. Not with pain, I don't flatter statues, but with friction as its neatly ordered plans rubbed against the grit I'd put there. Mina glanced up once. She didn't waste thanks on what we didn't have time to name yet. She said, "Move," and we moved. We got everyone unstuck and upright in a miserable kind of way. The porter was awake enough to swear softly. The word sounded like a prayer someone had dropped pet on the floor and left there to get dusty. Mina packed her trauma kit with quick, precise hands that had probably been shaking 5 minutes ago and would shake again later when she handed me a cup of coffee and pretended not to care how good it tasted. "We have to go," I said. "The statues aren't learning, but they're getting braver." "Isn't that the same thing?" Min Jae asked. "Only for people," I said. We retraced the route, adjusting for a few new variables the dungeon threw out to see if it could impress us. I let the statues have their little victories, nicked sleeves, grazed air, because victory builds commitment and committed enemies make mistakes. On the way, I took one long, deliberate look back at where the hollow had been. The air there sagged like an old sofa cushion. It would offend a certain kind of man who loves clean lines. I felt the pinch at my skull again, gentle as a child tugging a sleeve. Gluttonous Archive anomaly retained. Gluttonous Archive advisory UPDA. TE. Purge conditions trending from pending to active. Gluttonous Archive vessel shadow location undisclosed. Relevance critical. Stay with me, I told the voice that was not a voice. "We'll get there. I take it back," Mina said under her breath, and I almost asked her what she was taking back. "About your timing," she said, catching the question on my face. "I'm officially in favor." "Good," I said. It didn't get easier outside, but at least it got louder. The association perimeter was a mess of blinking lights and cheap coffee. Winter wind cut through down jackets and cut-rate bravado. Hunters who'd never admit to shaking stilled their hands by gripping paperwork too hard. The press was corralled behind a sad rope line that they pretended to respect until a cameraman leaned just far enough that a tired cop took a deep breath and considered yelling. Association staff fanned toward us with the efficiency of a hospital finally getting a diagnosis. The med van opened like a mouth. Mina peeled away from me to slide the stretcher into place herself, not trusting someone else to line up the rails with the clamps. She gave directions with her chin and 3 words, "Higher." "Good. Careful." Chairman Go-Gun he stood as we came out, his posture spare. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't have to. He had the attention of the men who paid the camera bills. His eyes were on me, not curious exactly. Not suspicious exactly, a scientist's interest with a grandfather's patience slipped over it like a coat. "Limb Hunter," he said. "Chairman," I said, trying out the weight of his name aloud. It felt honest to say it plain, without hedging. "Thank you." He didn't elaborate on what for. Lives saved, property damage minimized, a narrative kept saner than it wanted to be. His gaze flicked once to Mina, to Min Jae, to Da Bin, and then returned. "We will need your debrief." "Of course," I said, and added a smile I reserve for people who are trying to make their job keep pace with the world. "After the medical team gets what they need. We can arrange," a new voice said, and the smell of expensive cologne introduced him before he gave us his name. Minister Park Jun-seo smiled. With his whole face the way politicians learn to, then with his eyes the way a man learns when he's decided you might be more trouble than you look. A private room, perhaps. Away from all this noise. His suit fit like he'd practiced wearing it. The gesture he made toward the van was not a gesture in the direction of mercy. It was a gesture toward an arrangement. I like noise, I said warmly. It keeps me honest. Noise muddies details, Park said. And details matter in security matters. If you want details, Mina said, stepping between us while she stripped off her gloves, you'll get better ones when my patient isn't bleeding out in a van he can't afford to ride in. Park's mouth said he respected that. His eyes flicked to her name tag, to the scuffed corners of her case, to the S ticker on the van's back bumper someone had put there as a joke and nobody had bothered to peel off. His eyes did math. He filed things. Of course, he said. We value our medical personnel. We'll say about your unit's funding in the next review. Will we? Mina said, and didn't look away. She had the kind of face that reads as pretty only after you realize it's brave. Chairman Go's mouth ticked an almost smile. It was not aimed at Park. Limb Hunter, he said again, softer, for me. When you can spare the time. I'll be there, I said. He nodded. Park did a little shrug he probably practiced in mirrors. Then looked over my shoulder, not up, because he was careful not to get caught looking impressed, and smiled again, this time more genuinely. Ah, he said. Our observers. I turned. Ishida Ren wore formality-like armor. Black coat, silver pin at the collarbone, hair so precisely cut it could have drawn its own divide between polite and impolite. The two hunters with him radiated a brand of patience that smells like money. The press perked up. Japanese S-rank on Korean soil was a headline you could sell to people who otherwise only like headlines about sports. Mr. Lim, Ren said. His Korean was immaculate and so was the bow he offered, exact in degree. A pleasure to witness your work. I'm Ishida Ren, appointed representative for the Kaizen Guild. We're observing cross-border response procedures. He let the last three words fall like a silk curtain over a window, obscuring and pretty at once. Hanru is fine, I said, meeting his eyes. And I prefer Ren, he returned lightly. If we become friends. If, I said. He smiled the way a knife might if it had lips. If, he repeated. I found your improvisation against the patrolling constructs educational. Like watching someone play Go without ever placing a stone. I'm better at shogi, I said. I doubt that, he murmured, not to be cruel, it was simply a fact in his world that he didn't lose games to strangers. Perhaps you would indulge me in a friendly evaluation while my team is in Seoul. The association has a training dome with immaculate safety records. I love immaculate safety records, I said. They make for such dramatic exceptions. He laughed, surprised. You're either very confident or very reckless. Ren, I said, because if we were going to pretend to be friends, we should start now. I am trying a new thing where I do not let strangers decide which of those I am. His eyes flicked down to my hand, to the satchel strap bit into my palm where the hollow nestled in its cloth. He saw the tension of it, not the shape. And filed that away as well. His people were already building files on me. They'd find contradictory rumors. The person I am does that to records. We'll talk again, he said, bowing again. Soon. Bring good snacks to the evaluation, I said. I perform better with carbs. Mina snorted and caught herself, looked embarrassed to have found something funny with the cameras around. I rescued the moment by looking mock serious. What? Performance nutrition is a science. Your science is noodles, she muttered. I almost asked what hers was. I knew she'd tell me in a tone that said don't laugh at me. And I wouldn't. Park was already walking, already on a call, already telling someone to prepare a room for a debrief where questions would be asked that were never recorded. Chairman Go was already telling someone else to make sure the debrief happened where it would be useful instead of where it would be convenient. The press would say other things. The med van door shut. Noise ate us and then released us. I felt the emptiness in the satchel like a sleeping thing's breath. Not present, present, present. It wanted to be somewhere cold. It was used to being treated as a mistake. Gluttonous archive, untyped null kernel containment stable. Gluttonous archive, advisory. Prolonged exposure may affect local reality persistence. Gluttonous archive, addendum, listening. You don't have to explain. I said to a voice that never argued with me. Just stick with me. Phones chimed and hummed all along the rope line as the first shaky videos from inside the cathedral went live. The world scooped up the narrative like water from a well and saw its own reflection in it. Some would see heroics and be moved to buy coffee for people wearing association jackets. Some would see stupid risks and write angry posts about hunter arrogance. Some would see the blue light and remember a church where they'd been told they were small and be angry for reasons they didn't have words for yet. Hanru, Nina called from the van. She was halfway inside, fingers hooked in the door, eyes scanning for me and landing with an expression I hadn't earned yet. Thank you. Do not thank me for things I enjoyed, I said, and then added, I'll swing by the hospital later to check on your patient, and bring noodles. If that fits your, science. She rolled her eyes. If you show up with noodles, I will accept them, professionally. That's what they all say, I said, letting the smile be obvious so Park would know I wasn't rattled, so Ren would know I wasn't performing for him. So Chairman Go would know I knew how to carry a room and not break it. It's a small power you can choose to use. Kindness makes rooms hold together. The van pulled away. The rope line surged. Do you like the ocean pretending to be polite? A reporter shouted a question with my name in it. I didn't look. I let the question fall on somebody else's ears who wanted to be on TV more than I did. Cold nod my sleeve. The satchel thrummed once, weak, like an old heart trying to remember a song, and I felt the air around my head thicken the way it does when you're about to put your face in the water. The sky over Seoul flickered. Not visibly, not in a way anyone else would spy unless they were the kind of person who counts silence as a sensory input. For one heartbeat, the blue thinned and something not color looked back. Gluttonous archive, system message intercepted. Gluttonous archive, anomaly noted. Quarantine holds. Gluttonous archive, purge candidate located. Vessel, shadow. Glue. Tetanus archive, advisory. Protect vessel to prevent collapse of desirable outcomes. Desirable to whom? I asked softly. No answer. The archive doesn't do arguments. It had gone quiet in the precise way someone goes quiet when they've realized someone else is listening on the line. I looked out past the lights, past where the river made a black question mark through the city. For a second the shish. Ape of wings, thin as pencil lines, cut the stars and then were gone. Not angelic, not anything you should etch into stained glass to scare children toward obedience. The wings were administrative, the cold kind of godliness that never gets its hands dirty because it has policy for that. I said to the air. We'll talk later. Ren's delegation conferred in Japanese at the edge of hearing. Park smiled at a camera over my shoulder with the vocation of a man who had wanted to be an actor until he realized you get more power telling actors where to stand. Chairman Go put a hand on a junior association worker's elbow, an old man's gentle gesture that said here, breathe. Yes, it was frightening in there, but you did fine, you're allowed to shake a little. Da-bin tugged her helmet off and let her hair dump pins on the pavement. She looked at the blue of the cathedral doors and then at me and said a small, dazed thing, we didn't leave her. No, I said. You didn't. She bit her lip. Does it get easier? I considered lying for comfort and decided against it. It gets more practiced. She nodded like that was worth more. Min-jae stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Andy then closed them into fists and discovered they were his again. He looked at me, at my satchel, at the scar the statue's blade had left as a shallow smile along my forearm. You bled, he said, incredulous. As if my wound had betrayed something he'd decided about me. Bleeding is one of my hobbies, I said. I'm told I make it look relaxing. He laughed. It sounded like someone dropping a piece of metal in an empty sink and being relieved it didn't shatter anything. Phones buzzed. A text arrived, vibration low and familiar. Nina's name on the screen. Thanks, it said, lowercase, too fast, tip. Ed with one thumb while hanging onto a stretcher. I typed back. Later, noodles and got the 3-dot typing indicator like a small, silly heartbeat. No reply. Good. She had other priorities. The dots vanished. I lifted my head and let the city's damp press my lungs. Coffee steamed in paper cups. Electric lights did their best imitation of stars. Somewhere a kid in a hoodie asked his friend if he's hold become a hunter now that even low ranks could be famous if they did the right thing in the wrong place. Somewhere a mother texted a child with a string of emojis that meant don't you dare go near that gate. The world goes on under the teeth. Another pinch, lighter this time, like the archive was trying to clear its throat without being rude. Gluttonous archive listening. Yeah, I said. Me too. The cold weight in my satchel shifted, just once, as if it had remembered it was an object that had a choice to be here. The sky, only for me maybe, or for anyone who likes to count the ways light fails, blinked again. Not lightning, not power grid, just reality going ham. I smiled into the quiet and let it bother someone else who wanted to worry at me. Then I looked down at my hands. Wick. H had splinted a boy's leg and smudged dust on my jacket and found 2 other hands to pull into the living world again, and felt hungry. It is useful how the body insists on small things after it has wrestled with big ones. It anchors your mind to what you can actually chew. For now, that was enough. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. Steel Bridge, borrowed moonlight. The training dome on the river looked like a soap bubble had decided to get into the public service. Glass ribs arched, lights hummed, and the floor stripes were so clean you could have used them for surgery. The association had turned a sandlot into an arena that made you believe rules mattered. Ishida Ren stood at center court with 2 swords, neither drawn. The cameras made a shallow horseshoe around him. He didn't look at them. Hunters don't, until they do. Friendly evaluation, he said when I stepped in. 10 minutes. Light contact. Displacement boundaries enforced. If either of us breaks skin, we stop. Is that rule for safety? I asked. Or to make the cameras feel like they understand something? He smiled politely. Yes. Nina put her case down at the edge of the marked boundary and set a timer with brisk fingers. Her hair was tied back like a promise she intended to keep. 2 medics on standby, she told us without looking up, because she didn't care for theater. I'd prefer not to need them. I touched the tape line with my toe. The dome smelled faintly of disinfectant and ambition. The Kaizen Guild's observers drifted behind Ren like a row of quiet knives. Chairman Go had not come, Minister Park had, and pretended not to be there by talking to a clipboard 3 paces away. Ready, Ren said. Hungry, I said. Nina's timer chimed. We moved. Ren's opening wasn't flash. It was pressure. He closed distant. CE in a pair of steps that shaved off my space the way a good tailor trims fabric. No waste, no fray. He didn't draw his swords until he could have tapped my sternum with a thumb. Then he drew both at once, one to define the conversation, one to punish the answer. I didn't answer. Not with a blade. My weight softened, ankle to hip, and the line of his first cut found a place to pass through where I just wasn't kind enough to be. The second cut skimmed my sleeve, close enough for fabric to complain, then came back at an angle that would have convinced most people to tumble backward and reset. I didn't tumble. I poured to his left like a jug tipping just enough to change the pour. His swords clanged together, accidental, an admission he hadn't planned on me refusing to give him the one step he wanted. Interesting, he murmured. Same, I said. We traded small, ugly truths for a minute. He was clean, I was incooperative. He tried to write sentences, I kept changing the language. I didn't give him extended exchanges. I gave him edits. Then his floor changed. The rubber tiles beneath our feet shivered and became a lacquered grid, each square picking up exactly the light it needed to look harmless. My heel found a line and nearly stuck. Ren's mouth tucked in satisfaction, not malice. He'd read the dome manual. He'd trained here before dawn when nobody else was putting wear on the systems. Mosaic field, one of his observers said softly in Japanese to a microphone he didn't think anyone else could hear. Please direct attention to his tempo. Ren adjusted everything by millimeters. The way he breathed, the way his offhand blade sat slightly longer in the air to make my eye catch on it. He wanted my options to get smaller, not because he took them but because I convinced myself I didn't have them. The field had edges. Everything does. I let my toes find one, then the next, then the next. I let my shin harden a breath before his blade kissed it. Not to block, to convince the blade it had met more than me. It shaved a hair's width of my fake thickness. He blinked at that. The idea that I would ask a limb to be impervious for exactly one heartbeat and no more. A pressure pinched the base of my skull. Gluttonous archive mimic variance widened. Quarantine maintains. Thanks, I said between steps. Ren's eyebrows tilted. He thought I was talking to him. He saw me talking to my head and updated his file. Eccentric, possibly unstable, definitely dangerous. He expanded the field. The lacquered grid doubled and then went clear. No lines, no grid, only the hum of calibration in the dome's bones. My foot met nothing and everything. The floor knew where it was, and it knew where I believed I was, and it voted for him. I stepped out of the vote. Just the edges. You don't have to devour a forest to change a path. I took a taste of the field's perimeter where it clipped the venting under the bleachers. The dome's AI wavered, a tiny stutter like vacuuming up a paperclip, and the outside ring of his domain fuzzed. He didn't notice fast enough. He kept his focus tidy, center out, and counted on the edge to be loyal. I'm very good friends with edges. Ren finally drew blood, a thin, forgiving line across my wrist. He saw it at the same time Mina did and took half a step back out of reflex to honor the rule about skin. I closed the gap he had opened for courtesy and placed a mimic blade, flat. Not sharp, softly on his shoulder. The weight there was the weight of a hand you trust to tell you the truth before it hurts you. Mina exhaled. Her timer beeped. The crowd forgot to cheer and then remembered. I concede, Ren said, and meant it. He shifted the swords back into their sheaths as if he were putting words back into a mouth that had said enough. He bowed. I bowed deeper because this was his home turf and I'd eaten a corner of it. He noticed the angle of my bow. Respect is a blade too if you handle it right. Your technique, he said lightly, and wiped a dot of my blood from the back of his wrist with a white cloth an assistant handed him, is insulting. I try to offend only the arrogant, I said. How did I do? He laughed, a quiet bark he wasn't expecting. Almost perfectly, almost, I repeated. How rude. He stepped aside to let the cameras feast, used them for 3 sentences with guild polish, then dismissed them with a blink. The observers took their turn, building narratives that would make their guild look brave, collaborative, better than the rumor mill said. Ren glanced at Mina as she checked the tiny cut on my wrist, noticed the way she worked, fast, neat, withholding unnecessary comfort, and filed that away too. Minister Park arrived under the shape of a sympathetic smile. Limb Hunter, what a display. We should discuss how the state might support your gifts. The association can only do so much. National security, as a phrase you use to make people hand you their spines, Mina said, not looking up from the antiseptic wipe. Pa, RK blinked like someone had flicked his eyes with a finger. Pardon, she's allergic to politics, I said. I'm merely sensitive. He recovered smoothly. We can ease your team's workload, Miss CO, she said. We don't need easing. We need supplies. Which cost money that has to be justified, Park said, only not to us. He said it to the invisible audience behind us that likes men who say cost aloud with a firm, disappointed tone. We'll be in touch, Limb Hunter. Congratulations. Thank you, I said, truly. He was clarifying himself without water. Ren lingered when Park withdrew. I dizzly. It when rules are used as scaffolding for fear, he said casually, as if we were discussing weather. Me too, I said. We should find different scaffolding. Perhaps after a meal, he said. I've been told you perform better with carbs. Mina snorted. I am a simple man, I said. Yes, Ren said in a tone that meant, not at all. There's an S-rank gate opening above Busousan. Joint response is requested. If you're coming, we'll share the field. I prefer that, I said. Sharing is efficient. Sharing is dangerous, he corrected. Exactly. He left with the clean logic of someone who has a schedule down to the minute. Mina packed her kit with the speed of someone who'd learned to move before panic remembered its name. She didn't say I was reckless. She didn't say I made it look easy. She said, you are very good at not dying. Quote, And you are very good at keeping other people from doing it, I said. Her eyes softened a fraction. Don't make a habit of needing me. I already have, I said. And the line could have been flirtation if I pushed it. I didn't. She smiled anyway, the kind of person smiles at themselves when they realize their mouth is disobeying them and they decide to permit it. We rode south with the convoy. Sirens like strings under a movie that didn't need more drama. The river ran beside us for a while, then the highway shouldered mountains and the line of the sea pushed the city wide. The closer we got, the more the sky felt like it had an opinion about things we were not ready to vote on. The satchel thrummed against my hip. Once, gently, then a second time, impatient. I rested a hand on it and let the cloth describe the shape to my palm. Absent. Present. The way grief sits in a room even when no one is talking about it. Gluttonous archive, untyped null kernel, thermals rising. Gluttonous archive, advisory. Short-lived hatch event probable. Gluttonous archive, addendum. Vessel, shadow, trendline, rising. Purge schedule, adapting. Adapting to what? I asked. The archive didn't answer. It rarely did in sentences longer than 4 words when I wanted comfort. I appreciate boundaries. The Busousan gate hung above the waterfront like a wineglass someone had knocked still. The air below it had the charged quiet before a fireworks fuse catches. Ren's team moved with contained grace. The association's response unit looked like a high-end kitchen right. Before a dinner rush. Everything laid out, everything sharp. Mina checked comms and oxygen and the seals on a set of pressure patches with a thumb. I hate S-rank, she said matter-of-factly. Everything gets cinematic and the cameras shut up at the wrong time. Cameras love miracles more than prep, I said. They love blood more than both, she said. And then blame someone for not staunching it fast enough. I'll try to serve them better material, I said. She fought a smile. Try serving me less of it. We went in. The inside of the gate was a cathedral again, but not of the pious kind. The columns were fluted ice. The floor a sheet of tempered glass with a pale world swimming beneath it like a memory of an ocean. The wolves stepped out of the reflections without sound. Their fur was beadwork, tiny panes that caught light and swallowed it. Their eyes were anthracite, not malevolent, just stubbornly themselves. Ren lifted his swords. His team formed 3 points of a triangle around him. I let myself be the 4th point without making a shape of it. They're beautiful, Mina breathed over comms from the entrance vestibule, which offended me in a good way because it meant Shiko. I'd still be moved even when she was measuring blood. Let's try to keep them that way, I said. Ren opened with a feint designed to test for charge response. The closest wolf didn't take the bait. It watched his hips like a coach and adjusted its own. Pack logic. Not trained, but learning. Alpha, Ren said. Not in the front, I said. Listen. We listened, which is to say we moved enough to encourage them to talk in motion. The wolves tested with flanks, with 1-2 tag-outs meant to make us overcommit. We didn't. They grew bolder. The pack wanted to keep us between them and something farther in. Not a horde, a responsibility. Backline, Ren said, eyes narrowing. Something is shepherding, conducting, I said, like a metronome. He shifted tempo. The wolves drifted apart, confused. I didn't press. I let 3 of them map me, stepping in and out of their sightlines so they could learn a thing I wanted them to learn. I would not take their throat if they gave me their shoulder. It's strange how quickly a living thing will accept negotiated violence. The 4th wolf went for Mina anyway, sleek and smart and tragic. It didn't want her, it wanted us pulled backward into a baton. Glace of the pack could slam a wedge between us and the vestibule. I slid and met it with my palm instead of a blade, let my forearm harden for the bite, and fed it precisely the resistance it wanted. Not a trap, a conversation. It hesitated. I let it go, catch and release. It tested again, and this time I gave a little more, just enough that when it yanked, it pulled itself off balance into a stance. Wolves don't use unless they learn to. The others watched with the kind of stillness that means the pack mind is doing math. Why aren't you killing them? Ren asked, not accusing, curious. His blades hovered in guard, breath steady. Tempo weird, He was breaking his own sense of music on purpose to confuse the conductor. Because they're not the problem, I said. They're the alarm. He grunted. Annoying to be agreed with. Tell me about it, I said. We found the conductor in the upper gallery. Not by sight, by wrongness. The air was slightly too clean there, not wholly clean, sterile. Heat. Signatures wavered like they were embarrassed to exist near it. Ren threw a knife of light, his own, not the dome's, and it vanished into the wrongness like a habit swallowed by a new routine. Show yourself, he said. Wings unfurled, not feathered, not gleaming. The suggestion of wings, drawn with a ruler by someone who hated curves. Light made a blade not because it was beautiful but because it was efficient. The figure stepped out of the absence like a suit stepping out of a garment bag. Seraphiel. Executor, he said, as if the word were an identification number. Anomaly. Hi, I said. Lim Han-ru. He tilted his head as if the angle of my name would change its meaning. Names are how you apologize to the world for being difficult. Then I apologize with sincerity, I said. Stop scaring the dogs. They are not dogs, he said, sounding vaguely offended. They are custodial subroutines designed to conserve available structure. Wolves, Ren said through his teeth. Call them wolves. Seraphiel considered, then nodded once. Wolves. The pack pressed in on the lower level as if to prove the point. What do you want? I asked, polite. What I have always wanted, Seraphiel said. Baselines preserved. Deviations pruned before collapse. Collapse of what? Ren asked. Of the minimal viable universe where the maximum number survive, Seraphiel said. Your species is very committed to unnecessary flourishes. I like flourishes, I said. They're what make survival living. He looked at me like I'd commented on the color of a bandage while a patient bled out. You are not from here, he said. Neither are you, I said. A beat passed. The blade of light dimmed a fraction. I am from the Mandate, he said. I do not belong to your geography. Me neither, I said quietly. We can play tourist or we can do our jobs. He moved. Ren met him with the kind of clean violence men train at for a decade. 2-beat cut, narrow shift, heel turn that would have been beautiful if he floor weren't made of glass that showed you your weight in the world. Seraphiel's blade didn't parry. It suggested that Ren hadn't moved yet, and for a blink the suggestion was true. Ren growled, not anger. Adjustment, and changed his tempo again, broken rhythm doubling back on itself until even the wolves turned their heads. I stepped in where edges fuzzed, took a taste of the blade's outline, and found nothing to chew. Not energy, not steel, a policy given form. The archive pinched. Gluttonous archive quarantine boundary contacted. Gluttonous archive advisory. Direct devour, unadvisable. Gluttonous archive alternative, graze periphery. Modify behavior, not essence. I grazed. Not a bite. A brush. A hand against a shoulder at a crowded train platform that changes a fall to a stumble. Seraphiel's next strike arrived a fraction late enough for Ren to parry in reality rather than in a suggestion of it. His mouth tilted, shocked at the simple joy of physics returning his investment. Thank you, he said without looking at me. Don't get used to it, I said. The wolves surged up the side galleries like a river climbing a stairwell. I let one shoulder check me just enough to learn the pack's breath. Pack breath isn't the same as a single animal's. It's a tide with a skipped beat where the young learn to step without getting crushed under the grown-ups' feet. I borrowed that skipped beat, slid it into my lungs. And my heart calmed the way you calm a toddler by matching their crying and then making it quieter without telling them to. The panic in my body, small, honest, annoying, listened. I transmitted the rhythm on the comm without words. Nina picked it up first, of course she did, and her voice steadied in the channel like it had been hung on a nail. Copy, she said. I like that one. Keep it, I said. Seraphiel noticed. You devour patterns, he said. Not power. I prefer snacks, I said. And mercy, he said, as if that were an accusation. And mercy, I agreed. Our triangle shifted. Ren anchored. I lured. The wolves ushered. Seraphiel analyzed, adjusted, concluded. He traced a sigil in the air with his offhand, light intersecting itself at angles at made your eyes beg for a curve and getting none. The sigil hung like a corporate logo. He pressed his palm to my sternum. I felt heat and then cold and then nothing. Not numbness. Registration. Lick. Being added to a list carved somewhere difficult to reach. Do I get a membership card? I asked. When the pruning begins, he said, quiet with conviction, you will choose the baseline or the anomaly. Know that the baseline includes the lives of those you care about. Will it include yours? I asked. He paused, honest enough to check, and in the pause Ren landed a cut that would have meant so. Nothing to a thing that believed in arteries. Seraphiel stepped back, not wounded, adjusting algorithm. He looked at me again, and for the first time I saw a hairline crack run through his certainty, a line of human consideration. You spared the pack to redirect me, he said. That is not efficient. It's sticky, I said. Efficiency doesn't make people stick. Kindness does. Kindness is hard to model, he said. The line of his mouth flickered like static. I will return. I know, I said, because some people tell you the truth when they threaten you even if they don't mean to. He unraveled into the absence like a clause rescinded. The wolves froze, then shook themselves like wet dogs at a riverbank and trotted, as one, toward a stair that didn't exist until we looked where they wanted us to. They led us not to a treasure, not to a core, but to a window. The glass there looked out on the harbor, real and moving. A boy in a yellow raincoat pointed up at the gate and laughed, pure and scared. The wolves leaned together and watched him the way guardians watch something they could ruin by loving too hard. We're done, I said. Ren exhaled like a blade sleeps. We are. We backed out. The gate thinned with an offended shiver, as if we'd declined to be heroes in the precisely approved way. The cameras took over the narrative outside. You could feel it, the air changing shape to accommodate microphones. Collateral was light, 2 broken ribs, a shoulder dislocated and slid back into place with a private yowl. One porter with a cut that was going to get him sympathy for weeks and be the best kind of scar later, a story where he did not die and nobody else did either. Nina's hands shook while she taped a dressing. Not much. Enough. Breathe like the pack, I said, and didn't make a show of it. She tried once, twice. On the second, the tape lay flat and the flutter under her fingers steadied. She made herself laugh. I like that trick, she said. This world has too many that ask your body to be a machine. Machines break, I said. Bodies do too, she said, and looked up at me, and the look said thank you without noise. Ren drifted over with a bottle of water that had sweat colder than he did. I do not like angels, he said simply. I don't think he likes them either, I said. He blinked, then pushed past it to the thing he'd brought in his pocket, pride that discovered respect and was trying to stitch itself together with it. You made a choice there that cost you nothing now and will cost you later. Probably, I said. I will remember, he said. And repay it if I can. That wasn't the point, I said. I know, he said. That is why I will repay it. We were still standing in that quiet when a news alert broke across a bank of screens parked at the cordon. The headline didn't ask permission from Truth. Mishandled Busousan response. Medical unit delayed trauma care for hero hunters. The still image was Mina looking down at her hands with tape between her fingers. The crop made her look uncertain rather than precise. Park's fingerprints were everywhere and nowhere. Plausible deniability has a cologne. Mina didn't flinch, but the corner of her mouth tightened. She worked harder on a strap than it required and then put her hands still by force. I don't have time to care, she said, and I heard the lie she needed for the next hour, not for her life. I walked to the nearest camera. The reporter started her pitch. I stepped into the frame and smiled like a man who likes noise. We're not doing heroes today, I said. We're doing a pack. Our medics led the pace. If you want a villain for your headline, pick me. I'll be happy to argue on camera about who moved when. She blinked, the math in her eyes quick and obvious. Are you admitting? I'm admitting noodles, I said. I need them, and I'll be eating them with our medic, who is going to ignore this feed as a professional courtesy to the patient she's stabilizing. A light went off. A producer hissed in someone's ear. The reporter pivoted with survival instinct you have to respect. Limb Hunter, what is your response to allegations that foreign guilds bring better snacks? I said. Next question. Laughter broke the tension where it needed breaking. Not much. Enough. The satchel at my hip throbbed once. Hard, like the hollow had found a pulse. The sky over the harbor dimmed slightly. As if a ship had passed in front of the sun, except there was no ship and it wasn't the sun. My head filled with pressure and the archive flinched. Gluttonous archive, hatch event, partial. Corridor of non-occupation unfolding. Gluttonous archive, advisory. Purge advances. Protect vessel, shadow. Gluttonous archive, query registered from user. If I take the next hit, can I make the target me? Everything in me waited for an answer I knew I would not get as comfort. The harbor glittered like it was pretending to be calm for a postcard. Nina checked a pulse. Ren's hands were quiet on his sword hilts. Park's smile reflected in a van window like a man adjusting his tie in any disaster. The archive didn't answer in words. It answered by not stopping me. Good, I said under my breath. Then I'll stand where they're swinging. Hanru, Nina asked, hearing the shape of what I hadn't said in the way you hear a baby wake through a wall. I'm going to go start a fight with something that doesn't have a face. I said lightly, bring noodles to the hospital later. Professionally, you're insufferable, she said, and the tremor in her hands was gone. Ren fell in beside me without asking where we were going. You will take the next hit, he said, as if we were discussing fencing drills. I'll make sure it lands in a place that hurts me rather than the city, I said. That is a very stupid plan. It's my favorite kind, I said. He nodded once. Then I am coming. You are not the only one who dislikes angels. They aren't angels, I said. They're policy. Then I will cut policy, he said. We stood on the seawall with the wind in our teeth and the sky counting itself wrong in small, careful increments. The hollow in my satchel warmed. The brand on my sternum, the Lee GHT logo Seraphiel had gifted me, itched like a healing burn. What are you doing? Nina asked in my ear, voice clipped for the channel. Picking where the pruning shears go, I said. If they have to cut something, it will be me. That's not how triage works, she said. Triage is about saving the most, not choosing who bleeds prettiest. Then call it gardening, I said. She made a noise that could have been a laugh if you unrolled it. Fine, be a hedge. Window, I said, looking at the city. If I turn into a wall, I'll make it a window. Good, she said. I like windows. The harbor lights flickered. Only once. Only enough for people who count silence to count this too. I let the weight in my satchel climb up my arm and settle like a small animal on my shoulder. The archive listened. Let's go make a mess, I told Ren. He smiled like a man who had found an opponent he did not hate and chose to be glad. Finally, he said, we moved. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The city that held its breath. On a Tuesday that began with bus exhaust and school uniforms, sound fell out of Seoul. It didn't go quiet in the normal way. Normal quiet has texture, birds, a cough, tires over a seam in the asphalt. The private sigh of wind through advertising banners. This was subtraction. The river lost its voice. The flags on Mapo Bridge fluttered without whispering. Sirens opened their mouths and made nothing. Above the Han, a bloom of knot color unrolled like a banner that refused to catch light. People stopped in the middle of words and looked up, phones in hand, the way you look at fireworks. And your city is still innocent enough to think fireworks are strictly celebration. Gluttonous archive. Event, purge gate, metropolitan scale. Gluttonous archive, pruning anomalies. Please remain calm. The message did not come from screens. It came from the places where screens had been. A boy at the rail filmed anyway. You could hear his breathing because there was nothing else to hear. His friend Ugged his sleeve and said something you could only read on lips. Are we supposed to run? Yes, I said, not to them, because if I shouted they would not hear, but to the city itself. Run, and we'll give you something to run to. Chairman Go was already moving. He had that talent old wolves get, where the pack doesn't so much see you as it finds itself beside you with its teeth in the right place. He pointed once, twice. Barricades went up in the wrong places on purpose to channel people where they wouldn't die. Patrol cars stopped where ambulances needed to stand. A sleepy drone pilot blinked, sat up straight, and sent his 3 drones to hover over intersections with stopped lights so traffic police could wave cars through a pattern that made sense. Minister Park's staff called the words national security with the flat taste of sugar substitute. He adjusted his tie, he made a phone call, he began the work of saving the part of the day that could save his career. Nina's voice hit my ear like a snapped string finding tune. Triage point recon, East Bank under the bridge, wind break, cover from falling glass, access to both approaches. I need stretchers and a generator and a space heat. Because it's going to get cold when the sound goes. It already is, I said. Ren was beside me without preamble, coat flapping, swords in their quiet homes. He didn't ask who had called him. Nobody had. Some people don't need calls. They hear trouble like some men hear music. You will take the hit, he said, as if we were picking a seat in a train car. Not all of them, I said. Just the ones we can convince to prefer me. We stepped into the light that was not light and felt the bridge of not wind announce itself, air refusing to move, flags moving anyway because momentum hadn't caught up to rules. Even the river got stage fright. The purge made the city into a set, we would have to wreck the set to make it a place again. Gluttonous archive, untyped null kernel, resonance, rising. Gluttonous archive, advisory, gate carrier locating anomalies for pruning. Gluttonous archive, 2 anomalies detected. Correction. 3. I asked. The archive hesitated like a polite cough. Gluttonous archive. Vessel, shadow. Executor, Seraphiel. User. Good, I said. Invite them to dinner. The purge didn't roar. It subtracted. A bus shelter disappeared. Not torn, not broken, removed from the set. The map app on someone's phone showed a gray square where an intersection used to be, and then the map app removed itself in embarrassment. A woman screamed, a pure thing, the kind that makes animals look up. The scream didn't carry. Her mouth made the shape, her chest stuttered, and everything around her refused to admit noise was possible. Breathe like the pack, I said into the channel. If you can't hear yourself, breathe anyway, Nina answered. Steady, copy. I'm writing it on tape and sticking it to foreheads. Ren looked up without any change in his face. I do not enjoy this kind of enemy. You'll get to cut it anyway, I said. Policy has seams. He didn't ask how I knew. He nodded and moved like a man who trusted his legs even when the road lied. The null sovereign arrived by not arriving. The gate unfurled its inside-out wings, and reality yanked a shape out of the subtraction to make itself feel better. It looked like a dragon in outline, an absent leviathan, the way a chalk drawing looks like a window. When it opened its mouth, the sky inside that mouth was the sky you get after the power goes out and the stars realize they're allowed to be bright. Attacks did nothing, not because they were weak. Because you can't break paperwork by yelling. Anchor points, Seraphiel said, stepping out of a seam so thin I only saw it because I had learned to look where rules hide. His wings were still a refusal to draw curves. The blade in his hand hummed like a fluorescent light warming up. We stitch or we drown. You came back, I said. His face did not change. The purge has outgrown intent. It has become efficient without purpose. We need flourishes. He disliked the word and used it anyway. I am here because you are inconvenient. That's my brand, I said. Ren, can you keep things from touching the anchors? I can keep things from touching anything they wish to, he said. Tell me where to stand. He stood where Seraphiel would have been ashamed to ask a human to stand, out on the midspan. Between pillars, over the water where the railings ended and the wind refused to exist. He drew one sword and did nothing, blade low, stance easy. The kind of quiet that lets others be loud. Nina, I said. I have your window, she said. Bring me bodies that still argue. I set my palm on the rail and let my hand remember the shape of atmosphere. The wolves, breathing from Busousan. The skipped beat that made space for the small to step. I synthesized from almost nothing, humidity and exhaust and heat from human heads, the thin river of pressure that makes air behave like it's worth the trouble. Gluttonous archive. Synthesis. Street scale airflow weave. Cost. High focus plus mana. Gluttonous archive. Advisory. Maintain with pack rhythm modulation. The air between the triage and the road shivered, then accepted purpose. It wasn't wind. It was permission. Sound trickled back. A cough, a sob, the rip of Velcro on a medical bag. It was enough for orders to carry. The people who could still function heard a voice to obey and obeyed it. I shouldered the satchel. The null kernel inside had warmed like someone finally remembered to want it. I loosened the cloth and exposed it to the purge. It pulsed once and everything near me took half a step back. Lights, air, the desire to be a building. The gate paused, interested in a way that was perfectly impersonal. "Come on," I said, and grinned at something with no face. "You want me?" Ren's answer was to step a little forward, his blade tipping to accept the next problem as a guest. The absent Leviathan leaned. Where it leaned, paint peeled from bridges without crossing the space in between, like shame. Cars 12 meters away turned into their schematics and then into ideas and then into blank. I moved, not out of its way but toward the place it would prefer to be, because incentives make even algorithms sloppy. "Make me bigger," I told the archive, "not in size. In story." Gluttonous archive. Synthesis. Decoy anomalies. Ingredients. Null kernel residue plus stray electromagnetic noise plus city metadata. Gluttonous archive. Output. False anomalies with low appetitive signature. Duration. Seconds. GL. Adonis archive. Advisory. Deploy in breadcrumb sequence away from civilian clusters. I threw 3 across the river, one on a dead billboard, one on a closed kiosk that sold fish cake in happier timelines. One on a slope of winter yellow grass behind a fence that had forgotten its job. The Leviathan took the bait with bureaucratic dignity, angling to prune the wrongness first, which bought us 3 heartbeats. Which means 2 lives if you use them properly. Seraphiel anchored. He didn't stab the air. He inserted lines into it, like a technician feeding cables through a ceiling, your head tilted against dust. The lines took light like veins take dye for a scan. They pulsed with a polite certainty that made the gate hesitate. "Hold them," he said. Ren moved. He wasn't swashbuckling. He cut where people could not afford to fail, hands about to slip from railings, supports about to breath their last. 2 neat cuts in a chain of events that would have put a bus into the river, a heel under a door to make a wedge feel like a miracle. He looked like a man paying a bill he owed to every teacher who ever told him technique mattered. I stepped further into the pull. My ribcage began to feel optional. "This part is going to be ugly," I said, "mostly for Mina." "Define ugly," she said. "Government budget hearing ugly," I said. "I'll keep the cameras on," she said. "If you're going to ruin yourself, I'd like witnesses." I breathed pack rhythm and opened my mouth. It was not a swallow. Swallowing was what the purge did. Removal. I inhaled the core in a way that made space in me for tea. He thing without agreeing to become the thing. The trick was windows. A wall keeps a city safe. A wall also turns a city into an inside. A window admits light and wind and the smell of fish cake even when the vendors are gone. Gluttonous archive. Ingest. Null core, partial. Gluttonous archive. Routing. Into archive lattice. Bleed off into city weave via anchors. Gluttonous archive. Advisory. Memory loss risk. Identity drift. Fatigue catastrophic if overextended. Understood, I said, and forgot the sound my voice made while I said it. The world brightened because it had a place to go now. The G8 bent toward me the way a file seeks a folder. A line of pure absence traced across the bridge, coming fast. Ren stepped into it and cut just above it, not at the line, but where the line would be a FTER. It finished its thought, and the cut landed on a plan, not on substance, which is how you hurt policies. I let the line graze my chest. It burned without heat, like making a cruel decision at a young age and living with the version of yourself who made it. The brand Seraphiel had given me caught. Light flared, then folded into shape, and the gate encountered itself and suffered confusion. "More anchors," I said. "On it," Seraphiel said, and for once his voice carried a tiny breath of strain. Your metaphor is inconveniently useful. What can I say? I said between inhalations, my vision arrowing to a tunnel where names still lived. I like flourishes. You cannot debate a failsafe with poetry, but you can force it to admit you exist in a way its document didn't. The null sovereign S. Poke without speaking. Minimal viable universe. Baseline survival. It wanted me to sign a form agreeing that anomalies be cut to preserve the mean. It could not fathom that the mean is a comfort for bookkeepers. Not the thing that makes a woman go back into a building for a dog that will not leave under the couch without her voice. I gave it names. Min Jae, I said into the part of the world that issues memos. Da Bin. Co Mina. The old man with the cane who buys sweet potatoes from the lady with 6 grandkids. Ren, who bows and means it. Chairman Go, who pretends not to need a chair when he's tired because the young are watching. Quote, policy does not understand names. It paused because names have edges and edges are where the archive lives. The Leviathan lunged, and for an instant the pressu on my body made every molecule wish to be elsewhere. My hands shook. The null kernel in my satchel tried to flee and had nowhere to go, which meant it throbbed like a second heart that isn't yours but wants to be. Seraphiel swore once, cleanly, like a man who has finally admitted a word he doesn't care for belongs in the language. I will bend, he said. What? I asked, sweat cold under a world with no wind. I will model your kindness, he said, and it burned him like a confession. He changed the angle of his anchors. Not to hold the city against the gate, but to let it slip and then catch with elasticity. Steel becomes glass. Glass becomes tendon. Tendon becomes living. He learned and hated learning and did it anyway. Ren's voice broke through. Park has redirected press to your left. Of course he had. Cameras panned. The purge doesn't care about cameras, but people do, and people are who we were saving. The first drone I had seen earlier reoriented itself to hover over the bridge. I looked up and made eye contact with a lens. You've got battery? I asked. The drone pilot, somewhere in a van with coffee and fear, said, yes, sir, over a channel he wasn't supposed to be on. Then remembered he was not supposed to say sir and fumbled it into, yes. Keep filming, I said. Whatever happens, do not cut. Park's mouth tried a new shape as he attempted to decide whether to own the footage or disown it. Chairman Go told someone to unplug a certain power strip in a certain conference room and then to plug it back in after someone important had counted to 10. It is useful to be loved by grandfathers. Nina's voice was steady and unromantic. You're losing skin color. If you're going to be stupid more slowly. Windows, I said, I'm leaving them. How many? She asked. As many as I can without breaking. Good, she said. I like rooms with cross breeze. The absent Leviathan got impatient and showed it by erasing a billboard. I threw a decoy anomaly NTO the dying metal and watched it inhale nothing, satisfied. It veered toward a vacant pier where there was only a stray cat with one ear and a fisherman's chair left locked to a pipe with a chain that had forgotten rust was possible. The cat lived because decoys work even on gods that don't care about cats. The gate reached the part of me that was archive and pushed. For a second I remembered 1,000 years of a life I hadn't had here, voices and teeth and the warm weight of friends who chose me. Then the memory went thin like paper of a receipt somebody washed in a pocket. Panic tried to pry my fingers off the rail. Because when you forget yourself your hands try to save something they can hold. Ren touched my shoulder. He didn't squeeze. He told my nervous system someone was here and strong and exact. Continue, he said. And it wasn't an order. It was a promise that he would hold his corner. I inhaled again and the core slid along my throat like swallowing a future you don't know if you want. Seraphiel's anchors glowed brighter, and his wings, those straight lines, rippled once with something that might someday become a curve. The purge spoke through 1,000 dead screens at once, without sound. A caption in the world: remove deviations, preserve baseline survival. Your baseline is a graveyard, I said, aloud and not. We can do better ugly. It hesitated, not because I convinced it. Because hesitation is what happens when you meet something not in your documentation. The core quivered. I saw rooms, kitchens and hospital corridors and karaoke rooms in a hallway. WHER. EA Kid had hung medals from track meets on pushpins. Windows in each. I left those open in me. The rest I packed tight and quiet. The purge tired of being misdirected and tried to rewrite me instead. It fed my brand a new instruction: be a wall. No, I said, and the archive stirred in a way that was not just archive anymore. Gluttonous archive. Counter instruction: be a window. Gluttonous archive. I am changing. Seraphiel's head snapped toward me as if he'd heard it. He had not. He felt it. Finish it, he said. Ren stepped into the path of a solidifying absence and cut something you couldn't. TC but knew was there by the way people watching remembered to breathe for a second. His coat fluttered, not because the wind returned, but because the world remembered that movement is allowed. Ina walked a stretcher through air that did not want to carry sound and told a woman to look at her to hear. The woman did and calmed because someone's eyes had asked her to. Over the water, the Absin. Leviathan met a line it could not cross without running into me again. It hated inefficiency. It turned to find cleaner work and found none. It folded. It tried to remove itself so it could try again elsewhere, later, smarter. The anchors said no. Not a cruel no. A firm one. It exhaled everything it had not eaten. The city took it back, judiciously, like an ant with a Tupperware container. Why thing returned in the wrong order. The breeze first, then the sirens, then the pigeons, then the sound of the river, then the small laugh of someone who discovered they could cry now and preferred to laugh. The gate collapsed with a sound like held breath released. I slumped against the rail and tried to find my hands. They were there. They looked older for a moment, not because of lines but because of use. The brand on my chest ached. I forced my shoulders down because bodies love to fold in when there's been too much. I had promised a window. Seraphiel let his blade gutter out. He looked at me like I was a poem he wished to dislike. You corrupted the purge with hospitality. I told it to sit down and have noodles, I said. It got bored and left. He blinked once. The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was the thought that a smile might be a useful tool later. Ren's bow to me was sharper than any cut he'd thrown today. There was no performative humility in it. It cost him something to offer that much respect this publicly, with his delegation watching. He paid. You made the wrong choice beautifully, he said. It's my favorite kind, I said, exhausted enough to let the joke be the only armor I had on. He offered his forearm, not his hand. I set my palm against it. It was warm. Minister Park found a camera with his face. He declared that we had acted bravely but improperly. He promised investigations. He thanked the Office of Public Safety, which had mostly stayed out of the way, which is a kind of heroism that never gets hashtags. He smiled through part where his people pushed footage of medical delay to a friendly broadcaster, and then, mid-syllable, the footage cut to a crowd-sourced stream from a shaky phone up on the bridge. The boy at the rail, breathing into a quiet world, had kept filming. The drone had kept filming. The anchors, the decoys, the way Mina had written "breathe" like the pack in marker on the back of her glove and pressed it to a woman's forehead so she'd read it. The narrative Park had ordered flickered and then cracked. Chairman Go didn't smile, but he did accept a paper cup of coffee from a rookie and take a careful sip like it was a ceremony. We will talk about funding now, he said to nobody and everybody, and one of Park's aides realized slowly and then all at once that there were other cameras too. Mina finished taping a dressing, then sat down on the curb in a patch of sun like a cat. Her hands were steady because she'd taught them to be. I walked over on legs that had decided to admit fatigue only because the city was watching and would permit it as a human moment. Windows? She asked, looking at me without getting up. Open, I said. Some of them look out on a river. She nodded like that had been her plan for the day anyway. We lost 6. Could have been 60, I said. Could have been 60, she repeated softly, not to numb it, but to put it in a drawer where it belonged. We didn't kiss. I sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, and we inhaled together like the pack. 2 beats, skip, 2 beats, skip. Her hair smelled like cold air and antiseptic and something like orange peel from a bottle a friend had given her 2 birthdays ago because she never remembered to buy nice things. She wiped her cheek with a wrist and realized she had left pen on her skin. Pack, faint, backwards. Later, I said, I'm still bringing noodles. Professionally, she said. Of course, I said gravely. Seraphil stood over the water and watched a gull find its geometry again. I will report that the risk is lowered by specific human behaviors. Kindness, I said. Mess, he said, and didn't dislike the word as much as yesterday. And mess. He tilted his head at Ren. Your cutting was sufficient. Yours was almost graceful. Ren returned. Seraphil paused, then inclined his head a degree. We will disagree again, he said to me. Soon. I'm counting on it, I said. You don't get better at arguing with policy by sparring with poets. He considered me and then the city. Policy is not the enemy, he said, and for the first time it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Loss is. Then stop losing people in the name of saving them, I said. He vanished with a sincerity that made me think of a man promising himself he'd do better tomorrow without knowing if tomorrow is the kind that lets you. Ren's delegation hovered, ready with microphones and the low hum of translatable praise. He didn't look at them. He looked at the rail where my fingers had left dents in paint that wasn't supposed to dent. I owe you noodles, he said. That's not how debts work, I said. It is in my accounting, he said, and I let him have it because it would cost him less to pay a joke than to pay a kindness. And he needed to be able to afford both. The phone in my pocket buzzed. I fumbled it with hands that felt like they belonged to a performance artist who hadn't had enough electrolyte solution. A message blinked across the top of the screen with the indifference of clean fonts. Gluttonous archive. Vessel, shadow, stabilized. I let out a breath that had been holding court in my ribs for 2 days. Good, I typed back. And it wasn't a command. It was me admitting to relief. The archive stirred again. Not just the crisp voice of a program guarding its borders. Something curious, like a child asking permission to open a drawer. Something patient, like a librarian past closing hours who doesn't point at the clock. The words stopped, then reassembled. Gluttonous archive. We can listen better now. Hello, I said to the thing we'd made on purpose by accident, a ledger that now loved marginalia. Nina leaned her head against my shoulder and did not apologize for borrowing a little heat. What's hello? The part where a story keeps going, I said. Gross, she said. I need a nap. After noodles, I said. She laughed and the sound was not brave. It was human. People near Y turned toward it as if drawn by gravity, because we are all hungry for small proofs that the world still does the simple things. Park tried twice more to move the crowd's attention toward the angle that suited him and failed. He retreated with the grace of a man who knows a public loses interest not when they learn the truth but when they find a better story. Chairman Go handed him a folded of paper that might have been a schedule and might have been a threat you could frame as advice. Ren stood and was mobbed by 3 kids with foam swords who had gotten loose from parents and now dead a photograph more than they needed dinner. He tolerated it and then enjoyed it and discovered it had not debased him. He looked at me over their heads and shook his head helplessly, smiling in surrender to a city. I closed my eyes for a moment and saw a blue cathedral and a pack of glass wolves and a medic writing on her glove. I saw a dragon made of subtraction and a man of policy deciding to model mess. I saw a window. I opened my eyes. The river ran. Traffic moved. A bus shelter reoccupied its patch of sidewalk with the tentative pride of a kitten claiming a sunbeam. The flags snapped and whispered. A woman on a bicycle rang her bell twice to say excuse me, which is the sweetest thing you can hear when you are trying to stand up after almost being a wall. My phone vibrated again. Nina's name. You still hungry? I typed. Always and then, because I am not a wall, I added, windows open. Chapter 3 End.